May speaks for itself, and someday it will lead Klay Thompson to Springfield in the Basketball Hall of Fame. 4 championship rings, 5 times an All-Star, twice All-NBA as well, 1,000,000 threes along the way. In his prime, one of the best two-way players in the NBA as a knockdown shooter and one-on-one defender. But all signs point to Klay Thompson's time in San Francisco about to end. Warriors and Thompson unable to reach a contract extension. There were reports he turned down a 2-year, $48 million offer last summer, and so now he is available. What are we hearing is on the menu of possibilities for Klay Thompson?
Well, what I was told is that Klay Thompson is seeking a fresh start. Simply, this has been a real tough past few years for him. I think he would even say himself that he probably wish he could have did some things better as far as how he handled a lot of scrutiny. But it was a tough year for him. Injuries and everything that he endured, along with the contract negotiations. Now, what I can say is this, is that Dallas is in the hunt for Klay, as well as the Los Angeles Lakers. I reported yesterday about LeBron James being willing to take less money to open up the full mid-level exception to bring in a star-level caliber player to take on that salary. The way it would be structured, LeBron would take a pay cut, then also the player coming in would have to take a pay cut because that full mid-level exception is $13 million. But Dallas and Lakers are also exploring trade possibilities to try to get a sign and trade done for Klay. So Klay has his options. The sign and trade will probably be the more lucrative path to him getting his money, getting close to his market value. And so, the people that I've talked to with the Golden State Warriors, they're of the understanding that Klay Thompson has played his last game.
Well, market value, as we know, is whatever somebody's willing to pay. And apparently the Warriors were willing to pay $24 million a year for 2 years. Sounds like Klay Thompson's going to wind up with a whole lot less than that moving forward. Was this about emotion or was this about business?
I think probably more emotion, but like Chris said, he's played his entire career in Golden State. Maybe he thinks that run has ended and he wants to play somewhere else. He feels like he has a better chance to compete for a championship, either in Dallas, who just went to the NBA Finals, or with LA, with LeBron, with AD. One thing to keep an eye on, it's a little bit complex, but there is a potential sign and trade possibility with Dallas at getting slightly more than the $13 million non-taxpayer mid-level that Chris looked at. They traded Tim Hardaway Jr. to Detroit. That opens up a trade exception in the $16 million range, just a little over $16 million. So we'll see if there's something that gets Klay a little more than that mid-level. But yeah, I think if it is the non-taxpayer mid-level, there's going to be a bidding war for him because that's great value for Klay Thompson. Yes, he's not the same player after tearing his ACL and his Achilles, but he's still a good two-way player who defends and doesn't need the ball a whole lot. And that $13 million a year, I think, would be a great fit on any contender.
And even in a down year, he was still at around 39% from three-point range. There are a lot of teams looking for that.
No, there are a ton of teams. But I also think at this stage, it's not so much about the money for Klay. I do think he wants to have an opportunity to still contend for a championship. That's why it would probably make sense for a team like Dallas, potentially the Lakers. And I do think there is some emotion because here's a guy that's helped you win 4 world championships. And let's face it, he felt slighted, as he should, because there are a lot of guys with a lot less on their resume. Even last year, he had a pretty good year from a statistical standpoint. And you would have thought that would have warranted a little bit better deal. But the reality is that the Warriors are also going to be spending a ton of luxury tax dollars.
They were the most expensive team in NBA history last
forward,
year.
And you're going to be paying that for a team that really isn't a contender necessarily. They're still going to have to do a lot of revamping on that roster. But it looks like he's definitely going to end up somewhere else. And the reality is, in the Western Conference, he could end up tipping the scales as to who ultimately comes out of West based on where he goes.
And if you watch the Warriors last season at all, you could see the emotions. You could see how it wore on him because he kind of wears his heart on his sleeve a little bit. You saw his frustration when he wasn't shooting well. You saw his frustration when he was coming off the bench for a while and then yo-yoing back and forth between the bench and the starting lineup. It was a difficult year for him.
Coming off the bench, I think, in particular, backing up a rookie, Brandon Podziemski. Now, Podziemski played very well, but for a veteran who's won 4 championships, been an All-Star a number of times, and is headed to the Hall of Fame, that's difficult to swallow, especially in the same place. It's not like he changed teams and then was backing up a rookie on his team, his incumbent team after a decade. So I think that frustrated Klay. And Greg made a great point about the payroll. And, you know, we could spend the remaining 3 hours of the show talking about the CBA, but basically to simplify, you hear a lot of talk this week about the aprons, first apron, second apron, frozen picks. If I were to simplify it as cleanly as I can, what the NBA wants is the highest spending teams to spend less. They don't want them to be able to spend with impunity, which Joe Lacob has done in Golden State. Steve Ballmer in LA with the Clippers has done the same thing to some extent. So the NBA wants the highest spending teams to spend less and be heavily penalized if they continue to spend. And they also want the lowest spending teams to spend more. So they want to bring the ceiling down. They want to bring the floor up and have the teams operate in the middle. And to Greg's point, that's why it's so difficult to maintain these dynasties and pay star after star. At some point, it becomes financially irresponsible to do that. And it seems like that, you know, at least to some extent, maybe is factoring in with Klay Thompson in Golden State and the other guy we were just discussing, Paul George with the Clippers as well. Finally, it seems like these owners may be drawing a line and saying there is a limit to how much we're going to spend.
The penalties are real. I mean, really, really real. Even for really rich guys, these are real penalties.
Yeah, they're significant. The reality, though, I would say, is if Golden State were at the elite level that they had been in years prior, I do think they'd be willing to pay.
You could justify it, sure.
But I think the fact that right now you're a team that's fighting to be a play-in team, I don't think there is any justification. Now, the flip of that is you're going to have Steph Curry still at a high level, but not necessarily have a team that's capable of contending for a championship. So they're going to still be some concern in Golden State for how they move forward. That roster is presently constructed, absent Klay Thompson, that's not a contending roster. And I think they would still like to figure out a way to put a team out there that could contend. And this is also speaks to where the league is now, to what Ryan has just talked about. Listen, that's why we've had 6 straight different champions. This is exactly what the league is pushing for. They want it to be where you basically have 2 superstar caliber players and then a roster that complements them. And I think that's what teams are going to be trying to find the model moving forward to be able to contend. Because I think it's not that it's easier to win a championship, but the landscape is such that there are more teams capable of winning a championship than we've ever had before. And I think big picture moving forward, that does speak for a better business model for the NBA. If you've got that kind of parity, it makes the in-season tournament even more valuable, right? Because we had a team that made it to the conference finals that made it to the finals of that in-season tournament. So I think those are things that the league is looking at, and that's why you're starting to see kind of a changing of the guard, if you will, at the top.
I think it makes for a more interesting league as well. I mean, think of all the years we were covering during the Warriors-Cavaliers finals meetings where, if you're like me, you felt like at the beginning of the year you already knew who was going to win each conference. I mean, that was true for years to come. Warriors, by the way, up until yesterday it was reported that we're talking with the Clippers about a sign and trade for Paul George before he declined that option and made that impossible to do. This is why I'm turning back to you. Before you head out to your next job, anything that's happened in the last 5 minutes on Paul George that we can talk about?
No, still as of right now. I mean, I believe the Clippers are huddling. They're waiting for their opportunity to when they're going to meet, and I believe that's going to be Lawrence Frank meeting with Paul George and his agent Aaron Mintz today. And so it sounds like it's going to take a Hail Mary. That's what it sounds like. It's going to take a Hail Mary for the Clippers to keep Paul George. But as of right, anything can change. Still got what, an hour and a half away from the official start of free agency. So I'll say that. And then, stay on the Warriors real quick. Chris Paul, he had a guaranteed date of this past Friday that the Warriors and Chris Paul agreed to push back to today.
Right.
And so
$30 million team option.
$30 million team option, correct. If he's still on the team after today, it's guaranteed. But I'm told that option might get pushed back again. We shall see. But if not, the Warriors have to make a decision today. Yep. And if not, Chris Paul will be a free agent if they choose to waive him. You got to throw the Clippers, Lakers in the mix, San Antonio Spurs as well. So the Warriors have a lot going on.
And nothing to do with his ability at this stage in his career, but it's very difficult to see the Warriors taking on $30 million for next season.
Yeah, it's tough, and that's why they're trying to work with him and continue to push that guaranteed date back to see if they can squeeze a trade in and use that contract. But so far, that's not the case as of now.
CP's been around the block. He knows what's going on. He gets it. You are headed somewhere else. Where are you going?
Somewhere. I'm doing a Bleacher Report live stream.